Welcome back to another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. My name is Patrick Lyons. I am one of your co-hosts here with my friend, my colleague, my co-host of, we're now 100 plus episodes, Patsy. Can you believe that?
I
You
can.
can? Has it felt that long to you?
No, it's felt that meaningful to me and impactful.
That's a good answer. Patsy Freeman, welcome back to the program. Today, I'm excited about introducing our guest for our listener. Today, we're welcoming Greg Roche to the program. Now, Greg is the founder of Retention and Rewards Partners, and he's the author of the Fast and Easy Guide to Networking for Introverts. One of the topics that we love to dive into, I feel like regularly on this program, is leadership, obviously, because for us, good luck executing without strong leadership throughout the organization, right? You've heard us say that before. So we've asked Greg to help us unpack a very important topic today, and that is, how do you engage your leaders? We're going to talk about disconnected leaders. So Greg Roche, welcome to the Frustrated CEO podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Patrick and Patsy. Excited to talk to you guys today.
Yeah, we were rolling before we started recording, and I can already tell the conversation is going to be great. Greg, you've been doing this for the better part of 2 decades. You've been in engagement, total rewards, helping executives, leaders, employees stay connected. I just want to maybe start with, my sense is that this problem of connectedness, or the problem of engagement or disconnected employees, it just feels like it's getting worse than getting better. But from your perspective, again, you're immersed in this. Is that accurate? Is it getting worse or is it getting better?
Sorry to say, I think it's getting worse. And here's why I think it's getting worse. We had a time in history when all the work changed, 5.5 years ago, right? We all went home from work. We just all started working from home. We just didn't see each other except for on video calls. And then we came out of that and we've moved into, some people are working from home, some people are working in the office, some people are splitting with hybrid. I think on top of that, we've layered more and more technology into our workplace. And I think the more technology we have to connect us, the less human connection we have. And it's especially hitting us at work. On top of that, you have many different generations in the workplace with all different communication styles. The newest generation in the workplace came in during that pandemic, and they didn't even get onboarded into what it means to work in an office. They didn't even there were so many of those sort of day-to-day interactions in the office that they missed out on. And layer on to that they also tend to be people that want to communicate in different ways. Much shorter form communication, much shorter, much more online, much more through social media or through text or Snapchat and so you've got all these different forces now, and I think people are forgetting more and more how to have a conversation, have a connection, build a relationship. And that impacts everything. That's in our personal lives. But as it relates to work, it's making it much more difficult for people to feel like they are a part of the organization. And when they don't feel like they're a part of the organization, and feeling a part of the organization is, I know people and people know me. They know what I do. I know what they do. We know who the other person are. They are a person on the other side of that name that's in the from line on my email or my message. I get a message from somebody there's a name. Do I know who that person is behind that name, or are they just a name asking me to do something at work? Is it very transactional? I'm just shooting an answer because this is somebody that works over in finance or accounting or some other part of the organization that's asking me a question, and so I'm just going to send them a note back. But I don't really know why they're asking. I don't know who they are, and I don't know what their priorities are. I don't know what makes them tick as a person. And so whenever we don't know those things, whenever we don't see those names as human beings on the other side, it's really easy to forget our humanness. It's really easy to just say, it's just a name. I'm going to shoot this off. I don't really care what's going on with that person. And when you don't connect like that, it makes it really easy to move from organization to organization, right? You feel like nobody cares about me here. Nobody knows who I am. I could work here. I could work somewhere else. You just don't feel like you belong. And so I think there's a lot of that lack of belonging and loneliness that's growing within a lot of organizations. And you're starting to see a lot more articles about it. You're starting to see people writing about this and people, it used to be, are you engaged? Now we don't really ask people about engagement. We're asking about well-being and loneliness and how you feel at work, because a lot of that ties into whether you're engaged or not. If you're not connected to people, you're not going to be willing to give that extra effort. You're not willing to kind of go the extra mile for the team, or I'm saying extra mile, you're not even really want to be there doing the job in the first place.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of feelings that work is getting harder. And I think part of that is we just don't have people to support us and to lean on sometimes at work because we just haven't developed those relationships.
What other way? I totally agree with you. Seeing more and more people are having difficulty getting work done with and through other people because they want to treat them as their email address or their whatever, and argue that they shouldn't have to deal with that person. They're a human being, basically.
Right.
But what other ways are you seeing that this disconnected manager or that level of the organization being disconnected is showing up in the workplace, other than people moving from organization to organization?
Yeah, you said it. I think that you have to go to work. Usually you work with other people. Usually you work on a team. Usually even if it's not your direct reports, and maybe it's not your boss, so maybe it's not in your part of the org chart, you always have to work with people in other parts of the organization to get your job done.
Right.
If you're not doing that, right, like you said, people go, well, I don't really want to work with that person. I don't like that person. How do you know, right? I mean, maybe you've had interactions with them, but what I always go back to my career, and I spent most of my career in large organizations. So I was doing total rewards, compensation, benefits, engagement, retention type of work within large organizations. I always knew that, let me use compensation as an example. If you're running the compensation department, you have some key partners in finance because they set the budgets and we're talking money that we're paying people. You've got key partners in payroll because I'm typically sending stuff over to payroll and they're processing and putting people's paychecks. I always try to make a point of getting to know those people before there was a problem. And the reason for that is I don't want the first time that person sees my face or the first time I show up to be me showing up going, hey, I'm about to make your life harder because I messed something up and I really need you to bail me out.
That doesn't work.
It's funny. Yeah, people don't tend to like to help people just when they bring them a problem. Right? People like to know who you are and feel like you're a person they want to help. So how do you do that, right? And you've got to go talk to people. You've got to get to know people. You've got to say, hey, how did you get here? Like, how did I know how I ended up in this job? How did you end up in your job? What's your career path? What do you do? What are you interested in? And some of that stuff comes out naturally, interacting with people. But if you're going to think that you're going to show up to somebody and you're just going to say, hey, help me out now, and you've never talked to them, you have no relationship, they're probably going to be a little put out and they're probably not going to help you. And you're going to walk away saying that person's a jerk. Well, the problem is the way you approached it is you weren't coming at this from a relationship standpoint. It was very transactional, right? It was very much like, I need you to do this for me. And we all want to help people who have helped us. And so if you've come to somebody and be like, hey, you tell me what's your priorities, what's your focus, what's the most important thing to you in your role, in your job, tell me how I can help you with that. All of a sudden they're like, wow, okay, this is different. Sure, let's work together. This sounds like great. You sound like a partner, right? You don't sound like somebody who's just on the other part of the org chart who's going to come make my life hard. So I've seen so many times when I had those relationships and I could go to them and say like, hey, here's the problem. Here's what we got to do. I think we can solve this. And the person's like, yeah, sure, let's just solve it. And the two of us solve it and it's done.
Right.
The problem's done. We move on. Now, if I didn't have that, I'm going to go to my boss and escalate. They're going to go to their boss and escalate. We're going to get a bunch of people together in a big meeting. We're going to spend all this time talking about how to solve this problem when we could have solved it just by developing that relationship. So I think, Patsy, you asked me, how I'm seeing this, and I kind of went a different direction with that, because I think where you see it is very much that thing where people are like, people don't want to work together. They're working in silos. Nobody gets along. We have escalations. We can't get things done. It's because nobody knows each other.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, most people are generally easy to get along with. Not everybody, but I mean, most people, you go in and you talk to them and you get to know them, and then it's an easier conversation, and all the stress and some of that stuff around work of, different managers or things like that just kind of goes away when you start to develop those relationships.
What do you see is, I mean, I live near a university. I walk through the campus frequently, and I'm probably 1 out of 25 people that's not on their phone. Okay. I go and,
Yeah.
there's that pattern of, just you said earlier, technology is going faster.
Yeah.
What is required of me in the workplace to do what you just said? When the workplace is going faster, I'm remote, you're in China, I mean, there's so many other factors to keep us from stopping and connecting.
You mentioned, or how it seems like it takes too much time to stop and connect. And I think what I found is it's shifting this mindset on how long it takes to really connect and build a relationship. And there's people who have studied this that says you have to interact 7, 8 times, however many times you have to really interact to get to know somebody. I'm talking about professional relationships here. I'm not talking about the people you want to hang out with on the weekend or people who are going to be your best friends, but people who you can get to know enough so that you, again, see them as another human. In the example I was giving of, if there's a problem and I escalate and you escalate to your manager, and then we get together, like how much time and resources are being burned up in that scenario, when if I had spent 15 to 30 minutes talking to somebody, once or twice, getting to know them, really kind of saying hey to them, checking in on them, seeing how they're doing, it's really not a big investment of time for the ability to then solve that problem right away without that big, huge meeting. So the problem being, right, we have this idea that, it's got to be fast, it's got to be quick. I'm like on my phone, I'm busy. I think probably most people you see on your phone probably are less busy than they may appear on their phones, right? They're not actually busy. They're just, stimulating their brain with whatever they're scrolling.
Right.
So it is a bit of it is almost more of an analog solution, right, to a problem that's caused by our digital world, which is we got to have more conversations, and we're just focusing on work. I mean, I think that's a good rule for the rest of the world that we live in, is having more conversations, getting to know people and see people. And again, I think it goes back to that. Who are you? Not like what group are you in? What's your background? What do you believe? But like just you as a person. Like, let's just talk about you as a person. Tell me about you as a person. I think we expect everybody's going to just show up at work and know how to do that or be comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
And so we're all like shaking our heads. We all know that people don't do that. And I think they're getting worse at it. And so it's like, how do we get people back to hey, let's there was a time, right? And when we all talk to each other, and honestly, there should be more time. I would say, like, we have to throw in the obligatory reference to AI so we can make this relevant for the time frame we live in. But hey, if we're saving all this time with people using AI at work, shouldn't we have more time to talk to each other and get to know each other and collaborate and since we're not spending all this time at our desk doing all this work that AI is supposed to do for us, I mean, we should have more time to pursue human pursuits than we used to have.
And what's interesting about that point, it's a great point. What's interesting about that point, we've had other, we've had a futurist on here, Ben Pring, a couple of times, talked about AI and how there's going to be a greater emphasis. There needs to be a greater emphasis on the human connection, specifically between, a service provider and their customers, because AI can do a lot of things, but it can't do that human touch yet. Let's hope that it never actually can. And yet what I find is, and I think it's kind of what you're talking about, when more and more companies are using AI to do things faster, and they're not then seeing it as we're creating capacity for the human touch. They're seeing it as we can throw more work in there, right?
Yeah.
So it just becomes this never ending. Like now we're so much faster because of AI, and now we are expected to do so much more because of AI, instead of trying to do the same and reintroduce the human component that was, to your point, it feels like it's always been waning, but really took a hit when the pandemic came along.
Yeah, and I think with AI, a lot of stuff is getting, people are now starting to kind of substitute that for human conversation, and I mean, okay, great. I guess what I find is, it's comfortable because, the AI that I use always agrees with me, unless I tell it not to agree with me. I've told it, hey, you got to disagree and push back a little bit more because I don't need you to just like make me feel good every time you respond.
Greg, the more you talk, the more I'm like, I literally have said that exact thing. Patsy and I had that conversation earlier today. I've specifically asked my AI, stop agreeing with me all the time.
Yeah, stop agreeing. Like, push back. Tell me I'm wrong.
Yes.
Yep. And then you got to be careful because it can then it's relentless, right? It never stops.
Right.
It's always got the last comment, the last word. So then I've got to be like, okay, enough. Bye. Like, I'm done. See you. But I think, we're going to get worse and worse at communicating the more and more we use AI because, now it's like you're supposed to be rude to your AI to get what you want out of it because it's like the more direct you are, the more the better responses supposedly you get. I don't know if that's true or not. Read that somewhere. But we're going to get worse and worse at communicating.
Do you think we're going to take that? We're going to take that tendency and now apply it to our human interactions?
Think of how rude you get. I don't know if you have an Alexa or if you have any of the now they're like clangers or whatever the word is for it, like that the early AI or the early bots that we had. Like, I don't know about you, but we're kind of rude to our talking bots, and we're going to get rude to the other bots because they're just machines, right? I mean, they don't have feelings. And so we're going to get more and more direct like that. And that's going to spill over into our human interactions, right? We're going to get irritated that we have to use pleasantries and etiquette and, respect when we talk to other people. Cause we're like, we'll talk to AI. It's so much easier. I can just be direct. I don't have to do any of that.
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily, I'm sitting here talking, like getting more and more depressed as I
know
talk about this.
I was actually thinking, Patsy's been getting more and more rude with every episode. So it must be all of the AI that she's using.
Right. But I do think there's hope because I think, again, it really comes back to basically what we've all learned, or at one time we learned how to communicate, right? How to, and what I really think is more the biggest focus, the biggest area we could work on, whether we're at work or in any other relationships, is really focusing on listening. I think that's the biggest deficit that there is going on is in listening. and really listening to what the other person's saying, because that's when you start to really kind of understand where they're coming from and getting to know who they are. We're all in such a big hurry to talk and say what we need to say. I think if we focus more on listening, and this happens within the organization, right? As a manager, as a CEO, as an employee who's working with other people, really focus on listening. I've never really seen anybody have like a cultural value of listening. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but if you were saying like one of our core values is we listen. I don't know that I've ever heard anybody say that. Maybe they do. And I'm not talking about listening just to customers, right? You can say like we're customer focused. We listen to our customers. Great. That sounds good. But we really listen to everybody in the organization. And again, that doesn't mean like, hey, we're going to do an engagement survey or a listening survey. It's in every interaction, we're going to go into this meeting and we're going to listen to each other. I think that that's a big thing that most organizations don't put enough priority on. And in my work, you talked a little bit about my book, which is, kind of a couple people listening are probably like, that's weird. This guy's talking about like, what's retention and rewards partners? Well, that's an organization where I help companies retain and reward their people. And then you said, okay, but you wrote this book. It's a fast and easy guide to networking for introverts. I'm an introvert. I focus a lot on introverted stuff. And I think, where those things mesh is within an organization, and this goes back to listening, is a lot of introverts would rather listen than talk. And so they get in organizations where everybody's talking, they're all trying to, position themselves, talk about what they're doing. When you're more introverted, you're more likely to listen. And there's not, I don't think, enough premium put on that in organizations. And oftentimes I had been told multiple times in my career, you need to talk more in meetings. You don't talk enough. You've gotten that one, Patsy? You heard that one before? But I think, the antidote to that for me was one person suggested, well, you should just sort of insert some verbal garbage during the conversation. I was like, I am not inserting any verbal garbage. No, thank you. There's enough verbal garbage in most corporate communication or corporate settings anyway. So I just went with, I'm just going to try to ask more questions. I'm going to try to ask questions to clarify it, to show I'm engaged, to get more information, to try to control the conversation. But it doesn't require me to do a ton of talking. And it's not that I don't like to talk. I just like to listen and process. So I have to process it before I speak. So that's, that's kind of how I dealt with that. But I think, back to this idea of what do organizations need to do to address some of this loneliness, it's, part of it is listening. I think the other part is showing people or getting really intentionally about how you connect, like giving people tasks, right? So if you're a manager, your team, you say to your team, hey, who's somebody in a department that you maybe get an email from on a frequent basis and you've never talked to them face to face? This week, I want you to set up 15 or 30 minutes with them and I want you to go talk to them. I want you to go have a conversation, not about work. Just go, hey, you know what? I get a lot of emails from you. And I don't know anything about you. I just like to know when I get an email from you, like who you are and like, again, how did you get here? How did you end up in this role? Like, why do you work at this company? Where have you worked before? What do you do when you're not here? And sort of go challenge your team to go do that, because that starts to make it more human and that starts to create the connections around the organization. It seems like a really small thing, but it's a really intentional, tangible thing that you as a manager can do with your team. And then, I would challenge the manager to do the same thing, right? You have colleagues in other teams, you have people in other places, you go do that yourself. Or do it with other leaders. A career development thing I've given advice to a lot of people to do this is in their career in an organization. I will say, if you really want to get known, And I mean known because you want people to think of you for projects or career development, or you just want to learn about the company. Pick 5 people. They don't have to all be C-suite people, but 5 leaders that you think are interesting, or you've seen their name, or you've seen them speak at a town hall or something, and you'd like to get to know them better. And send them an email and just say, hey, I'm working on this professional development project. I'm reaching out to a few leaders around the organization. I'm asking them one question about their career. Could I get 15 minutes on your calendar to come ask you that question? And they're probably going to say yes, because number one, they're curious about what the question is. Like, you can't tell them what the question is in the email. You have to just like make them a little bit curious. You're only asking for about 15 minutes of time, which usually, they can find 15 minutes somewhere. And then you get into the conversation and you're going to ask them, what's the one thing that you attribute most of your career success to? Like, what's the thing that made you the most successful in your career? And then you just let them talk, because they'll talk for probably 14 out of the 15 minutes. It's probably going to go 20, 25, or maybe 30 minutes because they're going to be so busy talking, and you're going to be listening, and you're going to just listen to them. Now, eventually they're probably going to ask you, what do you do in the organization? Who do you work for? Why are you here? What are you interested in? And that's your opportunity to tell them a little bit about yourself. And now you've established this connection with this leader that they'll probably give you some advice. Take that advice, go try it out, see how it works, go back to them. Gives you a reason to go back to them, be like, hey, you gave me this, you told me to read this book. You told me to do this project. You told me to do this. Here's how it went. I just wanted to tell you. Now you've got this 3 to 5 leaders in the organization that now know you and are connected to you and interested in you. And I've had people tell me that completely changed the trajectory of their career. They got to know somebody, they got connected with somebody. It moved them in paths along their career that they never would have imagined. So these are really small conversations that happen within your work that don't take a ton of time, that help you get connected within the organization, whether it's for your own, feeling of belonging, so you can deal with any feelings of loneliness you have, or to help other people in the organization not feel quite as lonely and not feel like everybody sits at their desk and stares at their computer and nobody talks to each other.
Well, I love the suggestions, and I can see 9 out of 10 people that I work with looking like a deer in headlights, and it feeling like the most vulnerable, threatening thing anybody's ever asked them to do. So how can we help people connect to what is important to them, so that this is a bridge to be, to be more present?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, we kind of started off talking about managers a little bit. I think managers have a role in this, a very big role in this. And part of that is, one of the things that's awkward for people when they're reaching out to people they maybe never talked to before is they feel like, what am I going to say? How am I going to approach this? Is this going to be weird? Because we don't really like to talk to strangers. I mean, I know there's books called Talking to Strangers, right? And encouraging you to talk to strangers, but we don't really like to talk to strangers because we're afraid of being rejected. What helps with that is usually an introduction, right? So if you think about most of the people you know in your life, you know most of the people through proximity, which means you worked with them, you went to school with them, they were in your neighborhood, they live in your neighborhood now, they're in a social organization with you. You have this big network of people that you already know. That's proximity. The second way we know people is introduction. Somebody who was close to us introduced us to somebody else that they knew, and now they're somebody we know. And then the last way is strangers. But if you think about the people you know, very few of them were total strangers that you just met randomly. I mean, some people, but not many. And so in a work situation there, I would think it's something like you as a manager could say, hey, if you want to talk to somebody or meet somebody, like, let me help you and introduce you, right? So, and as a manager, you can say, hey, so-and-so here, I know you in the finance department. Would you be interested in talking to Greg? He'd like to talk to you about kind of what you do in finance. And hopefully that introduction helps take out some of the awkwardness and kind of sets you up for, okay, now let's talk. That's one way. I think, what I've seen some other managers do or some teams do is basically set up some, even within the teams, if they're a little bit bigger, set up some cross team meetings where you say, hey, I'm going to pair you up with somebody that you don't usually work with, and you guys just get together and talk. And I think once you kind of do a few of those, you feel like, okay, this is not as sort of daunting. It's not as overwhelming as I thought. And really, you know, I in my networking work, when I'm teaching people to network, and especially it's introverts who don't like going to networking events, so I teach them how to do it a different way. The way I tell them to approach this is, again, getting introduced to somebody, but going into this with the idea, back to the idea of listening, that you're not going to have to go in and say a lot. You're going to go in and ask some good questions, and you're just going to listen. And as you're doing that, you know, you don't have to do most of the talking, right? You're going to listen and hear what the other person says. Yeah. Yeah. So as a manager, right? Okay, manager, you're a manager for a reason. Okay. And I know not all managers love doing this themselves, but you do have a sort of a level of, I'll say authority, for lack of a better word, to be more like, hey, I want to put you together and you two together. Can you guys get together and talk? If you're a manager and you're struggling with that, you probably got some other things to work on about being a manager, but there's a good chance that you've done some of that or something similar to that, I would think. Patsy, I hear you're laughing, so maybe not, but I think we've got to try to give people some suggestions and ideas and things about how to navigate this, and understand that it's not going to be 100% all the time, right? It's not. There are still going to be people who have challenges and struggle to build relationships. But usually, again, like any of other relationships in our lives, if you know somebody, that somebody can introduce you to somebody else, or can, even if it's getting together as a group of 3 or 4 people. Like, so maybe it's not a one-on-one. Maybe it's like, hey, I know this person and they know them. Let's all 3 get together and talk. And so then maybe it's not so daunting sitting down one-on-one with somebody you've never met before and having that conversation. Or, you know, groups of 3, 4, 5, that you can start to create some of these moments where people can talk to each other and really kind of get to know each other. And I'm that person too, that I don't like the forced corporate fun. Like, I don't want to go to like the trust fall or the trust walk, or, you know, I think this stuff gets a bad rap, because people are thinking like, oh, it's this like corporate thing where I got to go to the happy hour and I've got to sit there and we're all going to go throw axes together or something, you know, and it's like I got to get to know people. And a lot of people just don't really thrive in that environment. And so that's why I try to kind of break this down to more of an individual or small or group level, and something that each manager can do, as opposed to some big organized event that they're going to like promote and everybody's going to leave the office early on Friday afternoon to go do this event. You know, again, some people are just not going to be into that. So what are some other ways that you can try to encourage people to spend some time getting to know other people that they're working with?
That so I have a question. Earlier in the conversation, Greg, you talked about many generations in the workforce today, and we've talked about that here on this show before. I think, I don't know, is it 6 generations in the workforce? It's a big number.
The generations get smaller, not smaller in size, but like the time keeps narrowing as
the window
as
of
they
years
keep coming up.
Yeah.
The windows, gets shorter.
And one of the things that we know about organization culture is one of the things that binds cultures together, any culture, is what we call common language, common tools, right? That if you and I have a different set of tools or a different language, and that's, how many subcultures do you see? Gen Z has a different language where the words that we used now means something different, and it's intentional, because it binds the subculture together. It binds Gen Z together, but it also can, and we do the same thing, not to pick on them. We have our own words that we use that they don't know the definitions of. So when you think about 6 or more generations in the workforce, and you think about connection, bringing people together, how do you advise organizations or leaders to overcome some of those language barriers? No, not talking about like we don't speak English, because we do, but we all
Right.
speak variations of it. How do you, even the tools? Recently, I had a conversation with someone who would be categorized as a baby boomer, and I struggle with, like, even baby boomer now is more of a label than a generational characteristic, than a generational identifier. It's like, boomer, right?
Yep.
But even the way someone in the baby boomer generation and somebody in Gen Z uses a cell phone, or how they use it, how often they use it, the apps that they're on, it's a common tool, but how they use it makes it very uncommon. So how do you overcome some of these barriers to connection or communication or relationship with all of these generations in the workforce at the same time? How do you advise?
Yeah, I would hope that any generation, hopefully coming into a workplace, is coming in with enough of an open mind to say, there's other people here who maybe can teach me something, right? And I'm saying every generation, right? So if you're in the boomers or the Gen X, you're coming into this like, okay, these kids don't talk like I talk, right? They don't use technology the way I use technology, but maybe there's something that I could learn from them, right? So people of the older generations, I mean, what people in those generations are really afraid of, they're all afraid of getting laid off because they're too old, right?
Becoming irrelevant.
And becoming irrelevant. So they want to, most of them, not everybody, right? But I think, a good number of people, they want to learn, what are these new tools and why does everybody do this? Like what's in it? Like what gets you excited about this? And not that they're going to suddenly start making their own TikToks, right? I mean, maybe, but I mean, they're not going to do it so that they can suddenly become proficient at Snapchat, but they're trying to understand like why, like tell me, like teach me, right? Teach me why this is something that, people of your generation really focus on, so that I understand it. So again, that as I'm in this part of my career, I can either engage in this and learn from you and learn how you think and learn what's going on with the world. And, I'd hope that the younger generation, and I do think they do. And, I think the younger generation always gets a bad rap. Let's be honest, right? I think about when I first entered the workforce, and I'm sure like people that were older than me were like, these dumb kids rolling up off the college campus think they know everything, and like we'll show them. It's the same thing. I mean, now I'm that guy, right? I'm the one that says that, right? So the younger generation always gets a bad rap. I think when I came in, and I assumed, the people who are starting work now, they want to learn. They want to learn how to do this job. Like they may know more technically, or they may be more technical or have more tools, but they want to learn from people. And I think they're not necessarily like, hey, teach me your old technology or whatever you used, right? But they're like, what have you learned along the way? Like what's your experience? Like what, if you could tell yourself at my age something that would have helped your career, like what would that be?
Yeah.
Like what would you tell your younger self, right? I mean, people talk about that all the time. I would tell my 25-year-old self this. And so I think if you're in one of those generations, it's look at those people, like they've have a whole lot more lived experience that you can shortcut your development if you'll engage those people and say like, what would you advise me to do? And be open to doing that. So, again, I think for the older generations, it's like, hey, explain this culture to me and help me understand it. I'm not going to become like you, but it would be great to understand. And the younger generations, it's like, let me benefit from your wisdom. Let me not make all the same mistakes you made. And so, okay, so that's my suggestion. How does that happen? Again, it happens if you sit down and you talk about it, right? It happens if you have these conversations. It doesn't happen if you sit in your corner of the lunchroom all glued to your phones, texting each other, even though you're sitting next to each other instead of talking. And then the other, older workers are on the other side and they're just sitting there talking about those crazy kids that can't talk to each other. Right. So you kind of said it, like we're labeling into generations here, and we're saying like this generation does this and this generation does this. And then we're assuming that about every person in that group. But I've always found, whether it's that or whether it's, race or gender or, sexual orientation, like people get labeled with all those things. When I sit down and I talk to a person and I talk to that person as a person, all that stuff doesn't matter. It kind of goes away. Like all of the social stuff just kind of goes away. Like, because I'm not looking at you as with any of those labels. I'm just talking to you about what's your life been like. And that's not to, I'm not saying don't tell me about your experience. I'm just saying now I see you as an individual, not as some member of a group that maybe has a different point of view on the world than I do. And so I think it's the same with the generations. I think it's, you get into work and there's all different types of people at work. And, you got to figure out how to work with all of them. And I think that the best way to do that is like, let's sit down and talk and not talk about all the big issues necessarily, but just where'd you grow up? How'd you get here? Like, what was your experience? Like, what have you learned along the way? And listen to that and then go, oh, okay, interesting, and they'll probably go, you tell me your story. And now we're telling each other our stories. And now we're like, oh, okay, you're Patrick, I'm Greg. That's it. There's no other sort of categories that go around us if we sit down and we talk about things like that. That's another one. That would be another core value that I would love to see in companies is curiosity, listening and curiosity. And maybe these aren't like the core values of the company, but they're like the people values of the company, that we're curious. I love that word in lots of contexts, because I think coming at something from that point of view makes lots of interactions easier, especially, and again, if you're having these conversations, it's like, hey, I'm curious about Gen Z and what you guys, like how you see the workplace. Because I mean, I can tell you, I talk to a lot of college students because they say, I know I need a network, but I'm in college. Like, how am I going to network? And when I get to the point where I'm talking about listening to other people, I always tell them, you're listening to do two things. You're listening to learn about the other person and what they're working on, but then you're listening to give them something small. And again, it's not a job or anything. It's like, I go with AIR, right? Advice, introduction, recommendation. You want to give them some advice, an introduction, a recommendation. When I say that for college students, they go, well, what am I going to give? Like I'm going to be talking to somebody who's farther along in their career. They've achieved more. They know more. They know more people. What can I possibly give? And I say, you know what? You have a very unique point of view of the world. You're in college right now. You're in your, late teens, early 20s. You can give your point of view. That's something you can give to somebody who's farther along and sort of like looking back. That's valuable to know what the next generation thinks. And so they often discount and think they don't have anything to offer. And I'm like, no, you have a ton to offer, right? And you're closer to, what's being taught, what the, research is in your field. A lot of times you get out into the world and you start doing your job, sometimes you lose touch with some of the new stuff that's going on. And so any of those insights is stuff that you can give to people. But I think back to the point is, if you're one of those older generations and you say, I'm curious, tell me what, you think about work, curious how you approach work. And by the same token, somebody who's in a younger generation saying, I'm curious about how you got where you got. I'm curious about what it was like when you were my age. I'm curious about what's changed. Those kind of statements make it a much more approachable conversation, I think. So I'm glad you brought that up because that's a great point.
And you alluded to it earlier. It can be as simple as, I'm curious about what's the one thing that you attribute your success to. It's such a great question for any kind of interaction like that, where you're trying to, whether you're networking outside, where you're growing your network outside of your organization, or to your point, we talked about just growing your network. Think of it as more relationship building. The first, Oh, go ahead.
We hate the word network because it sounds transactional, and there's actually research that shows that people feel like dirty when they think about networking or go network. I just haven't found a great term for relationship building or connection or community where I say it and people know what I'm talking about, right? And so that's the challenge with that term is most people don't like it, but at the same time, if I say like grow your professional community, they're like, what do you mean by that? Am I going to like have events, or like, what am I doing? What am I organizing people, getting them together? So, I think that's a people just shy away from this idea of we've got to have more human connections, when in reality, that's what most of us need. There you go.
So, all right, let's get practical. This is the segment of every episode where we want to give, let's boil it down to 2 or 3 things that it's just points from our conversation, or things that we didn't cover, Greg, that you're like, we can't end without saying this, without imparting this nugget of wisdom to a listener. What 2 or 3 things, pieces of information or recommendations, advice would you give a listener on how to improve their own connections, or how to grow their organization's connections, how to grow their network? I'll leave it as broad as you need it to be.
Yeah. I think the practical piece of this is get intentional about creating relationships and make your actions smaller. And what I mean by that is, if you are trying to connect and grow your community, your network, whatever you want to call it, your relationships in your workplace, or you're a manager who would like to increase connection in your workplace, or you're a leader, a CEO who wants to do that, you can't just expect people to show up and just do it on their own. You're going to have to tell them some things that they could do, like the example I gave of reaching out to somebody in another team, right? So you're going to have to tell them some things to do. And I have a sort of 5-step I call it the relationship first playbook, that is 5 ideas that managers can use today to help their team connect within the organization. So you have to get very intentional about that. And when I say get smaller, is this doesn't have to be a big company-wide initiative that you launch and that you drive from the top down. This is something that an individual manager can do. Now, if the CEO wants to do this more broadly, sure. But again, the acts themselves are small. And the reason why they're small is they're more likely to get done. If you give somebody a project and you say, I need you to talk to, even the one I gave of reach out to 5 people and set up time, that's more of a project. That's something people could go, I don't really have time to reach out to 5 people, and then I'm going to have to talk to them. So if that's too much, reach out to 1, right? Get anything you want to get started and get done, you have to make the act so small that it's almost impossible not to do it. Right. And so this goes back to whether you're thinking of Dr. BJ Fogg and Tiny Habits, or James Clear and Atomic Habits, is this idea of these habits that we want, we have to make the action small in order to make sure that we do them. And then once we do them and we feel a little bit of a success, we build off of that and we can keep doing them. So that would be a practical tip that I would give people. And then, the other one is some of the stuff we talked about is, when you enter into these conversations, start with what are you curious about? I'm curious. I mean, that was a great one that I think we could add in there, is let's get practical. Just think, you're going to go talk to this person. What are you curious about? What do you want to know about them? and be curious, not just like, oh, I have to come up with some good question to ask them, but be like, what is who is this person? What makes them tick? What makes them show up? Like, what's their motivation? Like, why are they here? Just be curious, right? It's so whole Ted Lasso, right? Reference here, right? Just be curious, not judgmental, and just kind of go into it with that sort of Ted Lasso mentality.
Awesome.
Drop all the labels, right? And just just talk to the individual, the person. Because I think the more labels, the more reasons we have to disagree or not get along, or make up reasons to not talk to each other. So, once we don't have those, it's more like, hey, we're both working at the same place. Right. We're both trying to do the same thing. Like, it doesn't, like, I do want to get to know you. I need to know about you as a person. But again, we're both here. This is the thing we have in common. Let's work on that and talk about who we are and how we bring whatever it is our unique skills and strengths and backgrounds and experience together to help whatever it is we're here to do.
Oh gosh, I'm literally like, I have 6 that I want to say and I can't. I have to narrow it down, and I'm struggling because they're all really great points. From a very practical standpoint, Greg, I loved when you're talking about, as a leader, whether it's as a leader or just yourself, like, create opportunities for your people to sit down and have a conversation with the people they work with on a regular basis. It was just to me, it's very practical. Like, hey, okay, it's a great way to build the relationship, and it does make then problem solving easier on the other side of that. That was great.
Yeah, I mean, get even more practical on that. Go through your inbox or your email for the last week. Who's somebody that's not on your team or your manager that sent you an email asking you for something or pinging you about something, and be like, do I know that person? Have I ever talked to them? And pick that person and set up time and go talk to them.
Great. This one really resonated with me because I like to focus on the commonality more than our differences. And it was just eloquent. You said, when you sit down and actually talk to another person, all the differences that exist between you just kind of go away. They just melt away. And you start to find that commonality. And to me, that's just wisdom. That was like probably that's a nugget that will stick with me long after this episode airs. So thank you for that. I love the idea of approach every generation that's different from yours as someone that you can learn from. Very practical, right? Which it speaks to a lot of what we continually come back to. And it amazes me more and more the longer we've been doing it, how much of all of this stuff is about mindset shift. It's about it's mindset shift. So it's, nothing about the other generation will change. It's how I view them that will change. Instead of seeing them as my adversary, I can see them as somebody I can learn something from. How does that shift you? Just the way you approach them, the way you communicate with them. I thought that was great. And then maybe that's the last one, and I promise I'll stop. But for the leader who's listening and thinking, but this, the last thing I want is for my people to be spending 15 minutes non-productive time sitting in somebody else's office and just talking about, you hear that, right? What's the ROI? Yeah. So to me, the practical is that connections and relationships, you said this earlier in the episode, connections and relationships ease it eases the stress, the anxiety, the silos, the escalations that happen in the organization. There is absolutely an ROI to this relationship building crap thing that we see as unproductive time. How much time would you get back if you didn't have those escalations? If problems were being solved by the two people who had them, if people were working well across functional lines in the organization, that's the ROI, and that's incredible.
Yeah, and I would think, again, going back to leaders thinking about this and thinking back over their careers and how they got where they got, I think if most leaders really thought through it, they could think of a time where they worked with somebody who they just solved the problem right away. They're like, I call that person up, we talk on the phone, or we get online or whatever. I go down to their office and I go, hey, this is going on. How can we fix this? Okay, I'll talk to this person. You talk to this person. Okay, good, solved, done. I think most people would think or come up with a situation where that had happened in their career. And if they could think about how fast that problem got solved, and I bet they could think of a lot of situations where they didn't know the other person. There was like infighting, there was arguing, maybe it was civil, maybe it was professional, but there was meetings, there were work streams, there were groups that were formed. And how many hours did they spend on that? Like, I think people could probably think of those times as leaders that they've had those two situations and say, man, when I had that relationship, that made things so easy. Right? It's back to that leveraging your time. Those relationships are such great leverage. And if you can do that, I mean, yeah, I don't know what the number is. I'm sure it's probably 5, 10x on your time. And
Easily.
That 15, 30 minutes is well spent to develop that relationship and solve so many problems down the road that if you're saying I don't have 15, 30 minutes to send my people out and talk to other people in the organization, your team is not very efficient. Right. There's no way that they should be that structured. And they're, I mean, let's be honest, they're not, right? I mean, their team is jumping online, their team is trading messages, they're doing all sorts of other stuff that's not productive work. So just be honest with yourself. There's plenty of time for them to go have these conversations.
Awesome, Greg. Thank you. Okay. So if a listener is interested in finding you, connecting with you, what's the best way to do that? And then talk about your book and where we can find that as well.
Yeah, I would say a couple things. So the best way to connect with me, I would say, is on LinkedIn, right? So I am on LinkedIn every day, every weekday, talking about networking. So if you were to go on LinkedIn and look up my name, or you could even look up the Introverted Networker, I have that in my title. And so you would come across my profile, and then you could follow me, you could connect with me. That's where, again, I am all the time. From there, I have a weekly newsletter called The Introverted Networker where I talk about networking. So you can find that through LinkedIn, or you could go look that up on Substack and subscribe to that. I also have retentionandrewards.com. That's my website. And that's where people can go. If you go to retentionandrewards.com/gift, GIFT, if you go there, you can find the Relationship First Playbook, which is my sort of 5 ideas for managers to get their team more connected within their workplace. And so if anybody's interested in that, you can go there and find that. And you know, from a book perspective, it's out on Amazon. It's called The Fast and Easy Guide to Networking for Introverts. So yeah, but all that stuff starts at LinkedIn. So if you kind of come to LinkedIn and you poke around my profile, you can find your way to all those things.
Excellent. You answered the question, where can I get the 5 ideas? And so we highly encourage our leaders to check, our listeners to check you out, buy the book, and download. Why not download a free gift?
Sure.
So, Greg Roche, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks.
Fantastic conversation.
Great. Yeah, enjoyed it.
For sticking with us to the end of another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. And we'll encourage you the same thing. Connect with Patsy, connect with me on LinkedIn. We'd love to add you to our professional network. We can stay in touch with what we're doing, and drop us a line. Let us know if there are ideas you have for future episodes. And make sure that you download this episode's Let's Get Practical from our website at thefrustratedceo.com. I guess we'll see you next time on the Frustrated CEO podcast.